So far in this series, I have been working on very big projects that take entire episodes all to themselves, like my blaze cake factory and the steam engine that's hanging from the roof, but this doesn't leave very much room for the little things. I mean, I've done a couple of them, like the sugarcane farm and the egg farm, but those are really part of the blaze cake factory because they're just super necessary for it. But I have a ton of smaller projects that have kind of just been building up that I really want to get done, but they're not enough for a full episode, so I just haven't yet. But before we get to that, there's something I have to attend to. Pretty much any project that I have to do and create, even the little runs, require a bunch of different components, like deployers and train controls, I guess. Pretty much all the stuff in this chest. This is just all my leftovers. And almost every single thing in here requires some sort of create crafting station, like a mechanical press or a mixer or a deployer, and this is my current setup for those. I mean, it works. I mean, it's currently off right now, but when it is on, it works well enough. But it's kind of ugly, and also it's just a little bit cramped in here. So before we even get to working on small projects, I want to fix this. And because I've probably bitten off more than I can chew in this episode, we're not dilly-dallying with the details, and it is already done. I have given this whole area a complete revamp with the best block in the game, Podzol. We got some rooted dirt in here. I fixed my garden so it has a nice little rail now, because I had this problem where I would keep like swimming up to it and then like doing that and breaking one of them, and now it's nice and protected and off to one side. It's also a lot smaller, but yeah, it's fine. Of course, the garden isn't really what we care about though. We more care about the actual workshop, which I've kind of done in this stone stuff. It's tough bricks, which I think just kind of looks like dirty stone, honestly, which I think looks great for something that has like all these roots and stuff. Maybe it's some lichen or something growing on it. But if we head in here, it has gotten a complete new paint job, essentially. It looks so much better, everything is organized, and we even have a couple new functionalities. I had this fan system earlier with the fire and the water for washing things and smoking things, and now if we press this one, it activates lava, which can like turn sand into glass and do all of those recipes really fast, which is super nice, and has this little thing to protect you from burning yourself, because that kills you as if you were standing in lava. And also, this is new. This is a saw, and it is really useful. If I take some wood and I throw it in this barrel, it goes into the saw, and it is stripping the wood right now, which might not seem that useful, because like I use strip wood in builds, right? But other than that, what do I need it for? Well, andesite alloy, which is in every single recipe, like this thing and that, and literally everything in the create mod, requires stripped logs. And normally the way I have to do this is I place down the logs, I right-click them with an axe to strip them, and then I give them an andesite alloy to make them into andesite casing. But with this, I can strip them with the saw, and if I give this thing some andesite alloy, it just makes casing at lightning fast speeds, and that's 16. That is a process that would take me like, I don't know, a minute probably, but like it's long enough that it was getting to be really annoying, so I'm super happy to have this thing. But even that is not the extent of the upgrades that I've made to this place. If we go on this red carpet and we press our handy dandy button, it brings us down to the basement. And this area used to be where my sheep were, and it just kind of had like a sheep farm and some nether wart over there. But now it has a giant mechanical crafter in it, which I could use to make crushing wheels if I ever need to do that. And it has this, which is far more important, because if we pop on here, I used to have a ladder that went all the way down to the very bottom of the world, and now I have this thing, and this is an elevator. If we press this button, it is taking us all the way down to y equals -64, and we have 4 different levels on here. So this one is the surface, this one is not actually programmed yet, and that one is my mining level, and then this one is diamond level, which we are now here. And there's not really anything here because I haven't really done much down here. I have this little thing, but that was with my really old mining machine. Since I upgraded it, that's not a good tunnel for it anymore. But the point is, this elevator is sick, and I'm actually really proud of this design, because if we head up to this level, I believe, we can see this, which is the brains of the elevator, and it's so cool. This is the first thing like this that I've really tried to make. It's really just a logic machine. It gets inputs from the buttons on the elevator and from these sensors at each elevator landing, and with that it knows which level it's on and which level it's trying to get to, and it compares those two to tell the rope pulley whether to go up or down, and then it just toggles on whether or not it has power, and that allows the elevator to work, which I think is really cool, and I'm probably nerding out about it a little bit much for how cool it actually is, but I absolutely love this elevator, and it kind of brings us to our first small project. And by that, I mean it brings us completely to our first small project, because the first small project is elevators. There's a couple places that I really need to put them in that I just haven't yet because I haven't had the time. So I needed that one, which I decided to just lump in with the workshop because it's essentially part of it. Another elevator I need is this one because this is my steam engine. It powers the entire base. And the only way to get up here right now is to go into my blaze cake factory, into this mechanism, all the way up this ladder, and all the way around here until you get into the back mechanism of this, and then you're up there. And while I don't really need to get up here that often, I really would like to not have to take the, like, back behind the mechanism route, so I want to put an elevator here. And the other place I need an elevator is here in the nether, and I actually already have one here. I've shown it before. It's this actually horrifying little contraption that brings you up and down, and the reason that I say I need an elevator here is because it sucks. Pretty much what happens is, it didn't happen this time, which I am shocked, because it almost always happens. A lot of times, ghasts will be floating in this open area. When you come down on the elevator, there's one, they'll shoot you, and the ghast ball will miss, but it will hit this rope, and then you're stuck down here until... I swear I just heard a ghast shoot at me. I'm leaving. I don't trust it. You're stuck down here until the rope can come back down and reattach itself, which is really bad, but even worse is if a gas ball actually hit the elevator itself, I would just be straight up stuck down there, and I would have to, like, jump into fire so that I could respawn and get back up to the top, which is something I never want to have to do, so I want to make this thing a lot safer. And now that I have defined our two elevator problems, let's go fix them. First one is very simple. I just made this little platform, and if we press this button, there is a rope pulley up top that brings down a nice little platform for me so you can get on and then head back up to the top. It's not as fast as it could be. It's only half maximum speed, but maximum speed, it damages you when you go down, so I decided to not go for that. But now we're up here, and you can look at all the fun numbers that are currently -30 because it's not on. And of course, there is a button to go back down, but honestly, I'm never going to use that. I'm just going to jump down to the bottom. And the other one is a little more complicated, but still pretty simple. I cleaned up all of the stuff that was around my nether portal. It's been replaced by this button and this piece of red carpet. And if we press this, it brings us down into a nice little area, because I didn't want this to go all the way down, because since this is a piston as opposed to a rope pulley, it actually has to have a piston pull that is that long. So this has a 12 long pull, and if it brought us all the way to the bottom, that'd be an issue. So it gets you just below the netherrack so that you can go over here and use the actual elevator that uses a rope pulley. And this one actually takes a second because, like I said, it's not going at maximum speed because it would hurt you if it did. But after a little bit, you get down to the bottom, and it's nice and safe. You're covered in cobblestone the entire way through, so ghasts can't bother you. Also, I feel like my point about ghasts is, like, the game is trying to prove me wrong by not spawning a single ghast the entire time that I'm down here. And with our two elevators done, it's on to the next small project, which I don't have a super great segue for other than look at all that wood. Pretty much everything I build has a ton of just logs, like, everywhere, and getting a lot of logs to do all this stuff requires me to chop down, like, 10 trees every time I do a project, even more if it's a big one, like the one up there. That's kind of an issue. I don't like spending an insane amount of time gathering resources when I could automate it. But we're not going to be making one of those dinky vanilla tree farms that relies on like TNT and stuff. Instead, we're going to be making one using Create, specifically mechanical saws. Now, I talked about these earlier and how they can be used to do wood cutting recipes, like stripping logs for instance, but that's only when they're in this upwards orientation. If you take them and you place them sideways, you'll notice they kind of get rid of the like gray faceplate and it no longer has a recipe filter slot. And that's because when they're placed like this, they are ideal for cutting down trees. If you use a mechanical saw to chop down the bottom block of a tree, it essentially disintegrates the entire thing all at once, and you still get every last item, which means we can make an absolutely insane tree farm with very little effort. So little effort, in fact, that it is done, and I think it turned out actually pretty well. It looks a little weird, but it's kind of also off to the side, and once there are actually trees in it, those will draw your attention more than the weird-looking wood structure that it is. But it's not actually quite finished yet. I know I said it was done, but the main structure is the 3 inputs, or the 2 inputs and 1 output aren't. Because this thing is going to run on bone meal to actually grow all of the trees for it, because I don't want to have to wait for that, and also, if I had it just waiting for trees to grow, these things would have to be constantly spinning while they're growing, and that would mean they need constant power, and that would essentially mean my steam engine has to be on all the time, which I don't want to do. So, it's going to run on bone meal, and it's only going to be on when it actually has bone meal to grow trees. So, that needs an input, and that is coming from inside this pillar, which isn't hooked up to anything yet. And it also needs power, which will be coming from inside this one, which has a little bit of a system, but similarly isn't hooked up yet. And then it needs somewhere to put all the items, because it's going to generate a lot of wood. So that is going to be going into this pillar. But of course, there is a little bit of an issue with those. The first one is fine. It goes into this area, which is kind of just like an open cave, but I can easily go into this wall and into my, like, item transport network, and that can get to my base pretty easily. But the other 2 are a little bit more difficult. So all of my stuff is centered around the Blaze Cake factory currently, because that's what all of it has been working towards up to this point, which means that none of it is actually where these 2 pillars connect to the ground down here. It's all up in that layer of rock, not this one. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll have it come down these pillars into the ground here, go through here, and then up a pillar into here, where all of my power network and stuff actually is, because that's what it needs to connect to. Okay, I think I connected everything. That took forever, and I'm genuinely not sure if this is going to work, but I did hook up the 3 things, and also I can't press the right button, but we have the item output going in here, we have the item input over here, and this shaft is the power input. Now, I did decide to actually put this on its own power system of 8 water wheels, just because I kind of want it to be passively on, and because it's been passively on while I've been building it, it has already generated this much wood and also a stone somehow. But that's without bone meal, because this thing is just growing trees whether or not I give it bone meal, and since it's always on, it's always chopping them down. So we have 4 types of trees over here. We got dark oak, which just grew up, and it chops it down pretty fast. It's not like instant or anything, but it'll do. We've got normal oak, and we've got spruce. Spruce and dark oak I kind of use in builds. I don't know why I include this one. I don't really use it that much, but I had a 4th slot, and this slot is mushrooms, which requires bone meal to work, and I don't actually need mushrooms just yet, but I will really need mushrooms in the future, so that's why I decided to include it as one of my 4 wood farms. Also, like normal oak, I don't have another tree to put here. I only use spruce and dark oak in my builds. But now that everything is hooked up, we can actually test this thing. And the way it works is I have an on-off switch for all of them. So if I turn on like spruce, for instance, that lamp will turn on, and it hasn't started like insanely fast generating spruce or yet anything, because what the on switch does is it allows bone meal to go to that farm. So if I were to give this barrel 48 bone meal, and then we pop into free cam real quick, we can see that the bone meal will come out of here eventually. It does take a little bit at least before it'll actually get there, but there it is, and it's getting sucked up by the spruce farm, and it bone meals a tree, and that will make it so that the wood production is actually speedy as opposed to just waiting for the trees to grow naturally, which kind of takes forever. And oh my god, that is a gigantic spruce tree. But I think this just kind of also looks cool for like over by the base, just kind of like looking at it. You can see trees just like growing and then disintegrating, although it seems to have messed up. I think what happened there is it can plant a single spruce sapling and then bone meal it before it plants all 4, and that results in a single tree, which I guess didn't get chopped down properly. I don't really know what happened there, but as you can see, it is generating spruce, and we should be getting some spruce wood coming into this output barrel anytime. There it is. Stacks upon stacks of spruce wood and sticks, and we'll get apples from dark oak and normal oak just because their leaves drop that, but other than that, this thing is working flawlessly, which means we are ready to move on to the next mini project. We've got one more to do in this episode, and that is going to be solving one of the biggest issues that I currently have with Create. Not an issue with the mod, just like with resources. I had a kelp farm here that used to be my only source of kelp, and kelp is really important because there's a bunch of stuff in Create that like just simply requires it. Mechanical belts being the main one, but also tunnels and funnels, and that's actually it. I think actually spout requires some kelp, but pretty much kelp is used in a bunch of stuff that is super important, and it is 6 kelp for 1 mechanical belt. Do you know how many mechanical belts there are? Look at all of them. I use so much kelp, and I don't have a kelp farm yet, so I think it is high time that I fix that. And I think in terms of design, I'm literally just going to copy my sugarcane farm, because this thing produces like thousands of sugarcane per hour, so if I just do like 1 layer of this, it should be plenty good enough. So I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and build it. Okay, maybe not thousands an hour, but this one might, because kelp does actually grow a lot faster than sugarcane does, and just in the time that it's taken me to set up my recording software, we got 22 whole kelp from this thing, which is absolutely amazing. I've also had a little output thingy here, just like once it gets to a stack, it'll just like put a stack on display. Essentially, you can come grab it, it'll give you another one. That way I can just like very easily access all the kelp I need, and it should work great. I would AFK at this thing, but honestly, I don't really care how much it makes in an hour, because it will make plenty for the amount of kelp I'm going to use, because honestly, I do use a lot in mechanical belts and stuff, but like the rapidity, that's not the right word, the frequency at which I need mechanical belts is not actually that much compared to how much kelp this thing is just going to generate in the background. It's like up to 32, so I'm just going to leave it running and let it be, and it should generate us all the kelp I could ever need. And with that last small project, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this one here, because we have done a ton of progress today. We got a tree farm for all of my wood needs, we got the kelp farm, and we got, I guess, some elevators, but I really enjoyed making it to small projects. Definitely was a lot less like stressful, I guess, even though Minecraft is never really stressful, than doing like super big ones. So I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys did too, and I will see you next time.